Elden Ring is a game I've had an odd relationship with over the past few years. I was sold by Maxer's video on it, and by the promise of being able to cosplay builds in the game based on my favorite characters. This was my first experience with a Souls game, and it showed. I had no idea where I was going or what I was doing. I was getting stuck not just on Margit, but on the Leon and Misbegotten boss down by the Weeping Peninsula. I put the game down for several months, then picked it back up and powered through, finally reaching the end credits after fighting long and hard. I don't think I enjoyed my experience that much. Something felt off. I wasn't sure if it was the game or if it was me. I reached the end credits a second time, getting the Friendly Seed Flame ending for an achievement. I still didn't feel satisfied, so I went for the Age of Stars ending next. And I did feel like I understood the game better than before, but I still wasn't sure what I disliked about the game, and that made me so frustrated. Having collected all achievements, I proudly proclaimed that I'd never need to touch this game again. And then I did anyways a month later, to try and explore more of it. I tried new builds and weapons. I spec'd into various intelligence and faith builds, full dex, full faith, melee only or magic spamming. I even tried character cosplays like Saber or Jean Alter from Fate, or Edelgard and Marianne from Fire Emblem, all complete with their own builds. As I replayed the game, hours melted into days, days into months, until I surpassed 1,000 hours of play with no sign of stopping. And there's only a few games I've hit that amount of playtime on. Eventually, I started to memorize the game, knowing how each major region connected with each other. I could even follow most quests by heart, and I even know skips and shortcuts like for Ronnie and Alexander's quest lines. At this point, I couldn't really deny that the game was a masterpiece to some degree. The scope of the game was extraordinary, something made quickly apparent by the frankly ludicrous lift down to She for a river. That is how you pronounce it, right? The impressive part is that the game isn't just massive, it's got plenty of unique content to fill out that space. From field bosses and their gear wars that can go towards your builds, to interesting new areas to explore and uncover. The terrain and landmarks all feel visually distinct from each other, giving each region its own identity, from the dour blue swamps of Liurnia to the gold-tinged lands of Altus, making navigation easier. The game's confident too. Other games will guide you by hand to see everything, but FromSoft's perfectly happy to let you miss entire dungeons with major quests and signature remembrance bosses. The bosses themselves are always a spectacle. You're not just fighting your fellow man or mindless monsters, but gods strong enough to affect both the world itself and the stars that watch over it. Quite literally in Radon's case. The story's pretty interesting too. The lore tells a pretty dense story about Marika's conquest of the lands between, the shattering of the Elden Ring, and the subsequent war between her scions to claim the shards and seize ultimate power. Nobody won and now everything's broken, so you and the other Tarnished get pulled from the grave to eat the demigods and become the new lord. Boom. Brilliant story, jaw-dropping art direction, addictive gameplay, and an open world with many awesome content. It's probably one of the most masterpiece-coded games I've ever played. I wish I could have just given the game a glowing review and moved on with my life, but for me it wasn't that easy. When I look at the totality of my experience, now including that of Shadow of the Erd Tree, I can only give it one specific score, 8 out of 10. And it bothers me a lot. I've played other games that have deep problems and given them perfect 10 scores regardless. For example, Persona 5 and Persona 5 Royal, thoroughly fun and stylish, super fun party, and addictive gameplay loop. I don't mind that it's too easy to break or that half the antagonists don't really do justice to the serious real-world issues they're meant to represent. I don't mind all that at all. And then Royal swooped in and added in lots of great gameplay tweaks, writing overhauls, and a new arc with two of the best characters in the entire series, turning one of my favorite games to the genre into one of my favorites of all time, easy 10 out of 10 rating. Despite my ability to enjoy a game and ignore flaws that others find critical, I can't do that for Elden Ring. It has problems I struggle to overlook, from its core mechanics to the way it distributes content. Elden Ring, like the Souls series that came before it, is a challenging game. Dark Souls tests your ability to navigate labyrinthian environments, synthesize esoteric information, and respond correctly to the enemy in front of you or die. As the games got faster and the players got better, From Software needed a way to elevate the difficulty further, and their answer in Elden Ring was to boost both the player's ability and the enemies they face. The player now has more stamina, a jump button, and a much wider array of build customizations and optimizations. In tandem, enemies can hit harder, hit faster, and combo more frequently. The big showstopper bosses do this a lot, on top of having the flashiest moves in the whole series. I can't lie, FromSoft animates the bosses beautifully and it makes them a joy to watch, but fighting them is a different beast. The game finds some frankly hilarious ways to bamboozle the player. The planned culprit being the delayed attacks. Bosses will wind up attacks and hold them just long enough to make players flinch and start panic rolling. Even better, they're paced perfectly enough to punish spam rolling by throwing out near instant attacks. This thusly demands players either memorize the strict attack timings or learn to read the similar tells for when attacks actually go off. On top of that, bosses can combo into different attack strings based on your position and player animation, so part of the challenge involves learning where to stand. With all this, you'll have a harder time learning your safest windows of attack, but it doesn't end there. The attack windows and hitboxes can be a bit misleading. Some attacks feel jumpable but aren't, some attacks have razor sharp hitboxes until they don't, and sometimes the particle effects can go a little crazy. I love when I can't parse what's happening on my screen in this skill-based game about reading the enemy accurately. Love you, Radon and Rykard. This all culminates in a more trial-and-heavy combat style, almost more than any other Souls game. You have ways to respond, of course, like the tried and tested dodge roll. You can block or parry, and you can now jump over attacks. You can stack your defenses high enough to just eat hits, and you can even now deflect attacks thanks to a new DLC item. But what if I told you there was a secret arcane way to prevent attacks entirely? Returning from Dark Souls 3, you can break the enemy's posture and land a critical attack. Long windups offer you a chance to sneak in some extra hits, and charged heavies, guard counters, and certain weapon skills are the most reliable way of breaking his posture. Big rapid dog, firmly boop its snoot. Big crawly hand, smash it like you should smash that like button and subscribe. Godric the Grafted, shatter his kneecaps like his mom shattered the Elden Ring. Learning this mechanic turns the game on its head and pushes you to be more active so you actually get your turn to play the RPG you bought. And it makes for an experience that's overall both very frustrating but very rewarding. Well, can be very rewarding. The problems don't really stop at combat either. You know that map that's dense with content? See, with a game of this size, you can't really make wholly unique encounters and content without cutting a corner or 75. For every bit of cool and interesting content, there's copy-pasted enemies, including entire remembrance bosses. Why is there a Godric clone just hidden in an Everjail somewhere? Like an exact twin, except he's just missing Godric's face too. Earth tree avatars, tree spirits, dragons, more dragons, additional dragons who can inflict status effects. A region filled with endgame scale dragons that's just next to an early game area for no discernible reason. What makes it worse is that some just don't play nice with the areas you find them in, especially dragons, getting stuck up high on cliffs, flying out of bounds and being teleported back to where they started, or just deleting themselves. Most of these bosses make a grand return in Shadow of the Earth Tree, Shadow to the Tree Sentinel duel outside of Marika's village. It makes sense from a lore perspective, but it is a little bit lame on the gameplay front. A lot of these bosses are found in caves and catacombs too, which usually house boring layouts with repeated aesthetics and at times lackluster reward. And this leads me to my next point: balance. Let's say that at the end of your long journey, you come face to face with an absolute beast of a man. He's 20 feet tall, sporting a gargantuan axe. You find him cradling the body of his son Morgoth as it turns to ash. He turns to face you, and with a mighty stomp and roar from his spectral lion, declares his intention to defeat you and reunite with Queen Marika and become her consort once more. After a grueling fight of getting powerbombed, you finally claim his weapon for yourself, and it's kinda okay. The damage is good, but it gets outclassed by other colossal weapons that you can have an easier time building around and get much quicker, which are also better kneecap breakers because they didn't want the unique spell of the Axe of Godfrey to be good at that when that's the fun of a strength build, but okay. You'll see the same story with other weapons and skills. The Hand of Millennia has a fun Ash of War, but is risky to use against bosses because of the long windup and the risk of being either knocked out of it anyways or poisoned with the attack and then dying because the boss outdamaged whatever multi-hits healing sustain build you had going. My favorite example might be how R'Lana has an area-wide signature attack where she nukes the arena with her Twin Moon attack, but when you get your hands on it, the range is pitiful while having some of the highest demanding requirements among the sorceries. The voice isn't even that good, so you will be slapped down before you even finish casting. A lot of these mid to late game weapons and spells can be outperformed by basic tools like the infamous Carrion Slicer spell. Because they offer good damage quickly and efficiently and at lower risk than endgame tools, it builds to a theme of finding your own strength as a human instead of imitating the power of gods. But personally, I didn't spend £80 to spam magicknife.jpg at the enemy for 100 hours. But to make matters funnier, some signature weapons are just randomly broken straight up, like Moog's Sacred Spear or the Moonlight Greatsword, which are good, no, amazing, easy to use and low risk. It's actually so funny. All these weapons are rewards for stuff like quest completion, boss defeating, or just reaching a specific area. Weapons, spells, talismans, just generally everything. And it's not really split by what's broken and what isn't, beyond like certain legendaries being later in the game. On some level it's rewarding, but also not. It's rewarding when you find a good addition to your build, and it's deflating if you went through some random boring cave or confusing catacombs for weapon or talisman. You're not likely to use that run. But hey, that's something you can mentally note down for your next run, when you can just focus on collecting what you want for your new build. And now it's time to talk about when balance meets late game design. In the first half of the game, the map is super open. You can skip entire remembrance bosses because you only need like 2 to progress the game. Stormvale Castle, the game's tutorial legacy dungeon, totally optional. You can skip straight to Radon or Moog if you want DLC access within an hour or 2 of starting. It's awesome. It rewards explorative players and further expands the game's replay value, making certain runs feel more unique. But in the second half, the exploration is reduced to having 2 linear paths, one leading to the end of the game and the other leading to the endgame level Millennia boss fight. And this all begins with reaching the mountaintops area, which brings in a sharp difficulty spike owing to endgame enemy scaling. I don't know, man. I think when we started getting headlines like streamer gets stuck on Elden Ring DLC final boss for 60 hours, then maybe it's worth dialing back a bit. Just a thought. It's worth noting that a significant number of these endgame enemies aren't entirely new. For example, the returning dragons, earth tree avatars, and rot pests. And there's something almost anger-inducing about seeing a boss like the Death Viper shred your health, when it's visually the same as the ones you found early in Caelid and Liurnia. There's also the matter of story and lore. While the overall story of the game itself is very rich and interesting, the esoteric quest design is a little teensy bit mismatched with the massive open world scope of the game. On the player side, it makes it difficult to follow the quests because you just won't explore every inch of the map. It's not feasible. Even with the hints you're given, you might miss specific areas of the game or miss the quest by hitting a secret point of no return. What makes it a double-edged sword is that finding this content at all feels super rewarding by how hard it is. I also wish these quests would be more connected, especially around stuff surrounding the demigods. Does it feel strange to anyone else that most of the demigods don't really talk about each other? A lot of the speculation behind the lore feels like it's because Artorias just doesn't have the presence of mind to ask any of the non-hostile people involved like Ronnie, who I thought would have been madder about me jumping her mom, but I guess since we left her alive it's fine. Like, is it not strange that the Tarnished doesn't question why the only 2 people who know about Torrent happen to have similar magic and both have spectral powers? You can kill Mikla in Shadow of the Earth Tree and it doesn't change anything about Millennia in the base game. And likewise, Mikla says nothing if you've already killed his twin. Like, you'd at least think there's be some animosity beyond Morgoth calling them all traitors. Rolana, meanwhile, doesn't say anything at all, and we likely would never have known about her if we didn't just happen to find her in the Land of Shadows. I think part of this is because it might have further inflated the scope of the game if they had to consider more of how these connections work. And given how the game is filled with so many copy-pasted bosses already, it's fine. It's not ideal, but it's fine. What we have is good enough. Now, hearing all this, some of you might be wondering why I bother sticking with this game instead of playing the older Souls game or other action games like Devil May Cry or Bayonetta. Part of that is that I already do. I played Dark Souls 3 and Sekiro to completion a few times. I'm playing through Bloodborne in Expedition 33 right now, and eventually I'll tackle Lies of P2. On the action side of things, Bayonetta 2, DMC5, and Metal Gear Rising are my favorite action games, and special shout out to the more RPG-focused Nier Automata. As for why I keep getting back to Elden Ring, well, a large part of it is the freedom the game offers and the massive scale it has. It's such a dense game with enough different tools to make experimentation feel endless, and a map I always enjoy exploring, even when that map gets bad. It's in these tools that we find other solutions to the difficulty issues I mentioned. What's wrong? Can't find time to heal or punish bosses? Summon a spirit ash and let them take aggro to give yourself breathing room. Stuck against a multi-headed dragon and his deadly lasers and teleporting powers? Strike him dead with the bolts of ancient dragon's lightning strike. Struggling to survive Prime Radahn's absurd light show and damage? Stack up on defenses, bring a heavy bleed weapon, and just soak up all that damage while winning trading thanks to your high poison percentage-based bleed procs. The satisfaction of seeing your build come together to melt tricky bosses is more than enough to keep me going, even with all the game's problems. Add to that the joys of collecting items on future playthroughs for specific builds, and you have a recipe for a game that's endlessly replayable. If the game cheats me, I'll cheat it back. It's the law. So where does this all lead then? The game's amazing in its presentation and core gameplay, but the massive scope and frustrating design choices introduce some flaws players like me can't fully ignore. Perhaps it was unavoidable. There was no way to please everyone no matter what they did. The oxymoron of flawed masterpiece is strange, because one would think that a masterpiece needs to be flawless, but there's an exceedingly few titles I can call that score perfectly and move on with my life. But I can't do that with Elden Ring. It's got far too much great stuff to call bad and too many frustrations to call perfect. It's a drag to do this, but I'd probably give the game an 8 when it really should be a 10. But now that I mention it, is that really so bad? It's still a great game at the end of the day, one with a special place in my heart despite all the trouble it gave me. And perhaps when making a game of this scale is an impossibility to make a truly flawless product. Perhaps. So perhaps it's still a masterpiece regardless. I'll probably play a lot more of it until another game takes my fancy. As for Elden Ring, I'd definitely recommend it if you haven't yet played it. Okay, so like game ratings feel weird. Okay, so perfect 10s feel like game of the year contenders, 9 feels like great for most people. 7 feels niche but good for specific tastes, 6 and below range from bad to worst, but 8 feels like an anomaly because it feels like good but not super good, and it feels like you only see it on kind of middling AAA titles, the kind that do well financially but are super forgettable and generic. Like, am I bugging? What's the score system in this thing? Well, like, what's it?